With the 12th pick in the 2014 NFL Draft, the New York Giants select Odell Beckham, wide receiver, LSU.
Is the running back. Play action. And Manning's going to heave one. There's a flag. Beckham, a one-handed catch. How in the world?
Oh, my goodness.
And Brandon Carr was back there. I mean, he is...
Odell Beckham Jr. let his emotions get the best of him during Sunday's victory in Buffalo, and now the NFL's golden boy is paying the price. According to a report by ESPN, Beckham was fined just under $9,000 for punching Bills safety Duke Williams in the helmet during a Bills interception return in the fourth quarter.
Official Odell Beckham Jr. has been suspended one game for some of the extracurricular activity here between he and Josh Norman during that Panthers-Giants game on Sunday. We saw multiple punches. It seemed like everything was directed towards the head, neck, upper chest area.
As Jay Glazer first reported on the Fox NFL pregame show, Odell Beckham Jr. got fined $36,000 for last week's blindside block on Saints safety Kenny Vaccaro. Okay, Mike Pereira, it seems like that $36,000 is...
Odell Beckham Jr. is a Cleveland Brown. Cleveland makes another big move as it looks to reach the playoffs for the first time since 2002.
Odell Beckham Jr. is out in Cleveland. The Beckham era is officially over. One that started with so much fanfare, so much promise, one of the best receivers in the NFL, heading to the Cleveland Browns. It ends like this, on a Friday morning with the Browns about to officially announce that Beckham...
Breaking news, it is official. Odell Beckham Jr. is headed to L.A., and he is going to play for the Rams. One of the favorites to win the Super Bowl, going to be added to that great wide receiver core, headlined by Cooper Kupp. You got Robert Woods out there, and now Odell Beckham Jr. This after the Rams went out.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Sports Stories Podcast. I'm your host, AJ McSwain, and for this episode, we're going to be going over if OBJ is actually overrated. Is he perfectly rated? And I think there's very little people that think he is underrated. I really came across this idea from KTO, which he has a really great football channel. It just came across my recommended on YouTube. And it was made a while ago. It was back when he was still on the Giants. And I think it would be a good topic to cover over right now. Since OBJ, he's come a long way from being on the Giants about 5 years ago to, being on the Browns and now being a Super Bowl champion with the Rams and being a free agent as of right now and currently looking for a team, which I feel like many people are kind of overlooking that OBJ is still a free agent, which could play in the factor that, is he underrated? Because, nobody's really, besides, a couple, few more people that really need a topic to talk about. They're saying that OBJ, where's his contract with the Rams? I think everybody kind of sees it as a guarantee that he'll go back to the Rams because it just seems like a perfect fit for him. I mean, they didn't really add any wide receivers this year. So, besides Allen Robinson, but if you think about it, the three wide receiver core that would have been when OBJ got to Los Angeles would have been Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, and OBJ. But since Robert Woods went down with an ACL injury and then he did get traded to the Tennessee Titans, now this kind of changes up the wide receiver core here. So definitely, adding Allen Robinson was great, but I feel like OBJ, maybe got a little insecure about the signing, or maybe he just really wants a big deal. Many teams just don't feel comfortable giving him a big deal from what they've seen in recent years. Now, starting off with him playing at LSU, obviously, and we got to really start all the way back from there. Played at LSU from 2011 to 2013, and then in 2011, Odell's freshman year, he played 14 games and had 475 yards averaging 11.5 yards per reception, 2 touchdowns, and 41 receptions. LSU made to the BCS championship with a number 1 rank in college football. They ended up losing against number 2 ranked Alabama, 21-0. And OBJ had the best performance out of all the wide receivers on the LSU roster in that championship game, with 5 receptions for 38 yards. And he ended up second on the team with receiving yards, and also ended up 10th in the SEC with receptions. In 2011, Odell ended up first on the team with receiving yards with 713, averaging about 16.6 yards per carry, and along with 43 receptions and 2 touchdowns. And him averaging 16.6 yards actually made him 7th in the SEC with yards per reception. And then LSU ended up with a 10-3 record and were ranked number 9 in the country, where they lost to number 14 Clemson in the Chick-fil-A Bowl 25-24. And again, I mean, these stats are really kind of consistent. I mean, he's ranking on the team with receiving yards, receptions. He's basically leading the team in every notable stat, maybe besides touchdowns, because he does have a low amount of touchdowns every year. But at LSU, at least when I was looking at his stats, so he's not really leading in touchdowns, but he's leading in receptions, targets, and targets, and receiving yards for LSU every year. And then we go into 2013, his junior year, which was his last year at LSU. And Odell was actually second on the team behind somebody that we'll get to know on later, Jarvis Landry. And Odell had 1,152 yards on 59 receptions and 8 touchdowns. LSU ended up with a 10-3 record once again, and a number 14 rank on the AP poll. They won the Outback Bowl against Iowa 21-14, and Odell ended up being 7th in the SEC with his 59 receptions, 4th in the SEC for receiving yards, again for the 1,152 yards, and 3rd in the SEC with his 19.5 yards per reception, and finally 5th in the SEC with 8 touchdowns. So obviously, as you can see from his junior year, he really put up a really big stat line alongside Jarvis Landry. I think him and Jarvis Landry were the only wide receivers on that LSU roster in 2013 to go over 1,000 yards, and they were really dominating the game at LSU. This kind of boosted his draft stock. And as you'll see later, in 2014, Odell was drafted by the Giants with the 12th pick. Now, to get more reference to, I really added this into my notes, really just to give more emphasis on the, how big Odell differentiates from the talent that was, or at least notable. I'll put that in quotations because there's very minimal wide receivers here that are still very good and still are, playing at the level that, it was thought that they would be playing at. And it's a little interesting from here because so the 2014 draft class, Sammy Watkins and Mike Evans were drafted over him. I believe Sammy Watkins was the first wide receiver taken off the board, and obviously everybody knows that Sammy Watkins, him with the Buffalo Bills was a different beast. Sammy Watkins was a different beast. Then he went to the Chiefs, where I believe he won the Super Bowl. Just giving a few years here after his time with Buffalo. And then he went to the Ravens, and now he plays for the Packers. And and over his career, he's averaged 14.5 yards per reception. He's played 99 games and has had 34 touchdowns on his career. And the second wide receiver taken in the draft was Mike Evans. Now, that one was pretty surprising because I didn't think Mike Evans... I mean, there's a lot of wide receivers that were surprising. I didn't know that they were in the 2014 draft class. But Mike Evans, he was drafted by the Buccaneers. And he still plays for the Buccaneers and still plays at a really high level. He has 15.3 yards per carry. He's played 122 games and has had 75 career touchdowns, which is pretty, which is really good stats. And he's arguably, a few years back, he was arguably one of the best wide receivers in the league. I mean, I think he still is. His notoriety, I feel, has gone down just throughout the years because there has been so much wide receiver talent coming out of college and into the league that it's kind of taken away from him. But I think Mike Evans is still a really great wide receiver. If we're talking about underrated wide receivers, I think he's a little bit closer to being underrated than OBJ because, Mike Evans doesn't really get that much coverage, I feel. Once he's really in the postseason and once the Buccaneers start winning and he's putting out like some really good career stats, then that's when they talk about Mike Evans, but nobody's really talking about Mike Evans that much. So I feel like he does fly under the radar for, best wide receivers in the league as of right now. Because I don't really see many people putting him on the list, or he's maybe like an honorable mention, but not a lot of people are putting him at top 10, so that's a little interesting. But that's my little spiel about Mike Evans. And then going on to wide receivers taken under OBJ, we have Brandon Cooks, who was obviously drafted by the Saints, which Brandon Cooks with the Saints was, man, oh man, that was a very, very good Brandon Cooks right there. And that Saints team was just amazing. And Brandon Cooks just went off with the Saints. Currently he plays with the Texans, and I think he's making a slight revival of his career. He played with, the Patriots for 1 year. And he's playing on Houston, which, I mean, he's the best player on Houston Texans, which isn't really saying much, but I think he's still a great player overall. He's 13.8 yards per reception in his career, 119 games, and 46 touchdowns. And then next, we have Kelvin Benjamin, who I believe was drafted by the Carolina Panthers, I want to say. Yeah, Carolina Panthers. And he was actually really good in that in about 2015 when the Panthers made it to the Super Bowl. That was a really good Panthers team. I think a lot of these wide receivers here played really great at the beginning of their career and then kind of died off. And there are a select few that have continued to play at a really high level. But Kelvin Benjamin, a lot of people do know. He doesn't play for a team. He hasn't played for an NFL team since 2018. I believe his last stint with an NFL team was with the Panthers after he left the Panthers to go to Buffalo. Didn't really play that good in Buffalo. Went back to the Panthers to play tight end, I believe, and just really didn't really get far. So they ended up cutting him, I believe, and then he hasn't played for another team since. But his stats, he has 14.5 yards per reception. He's played in 61 games and had 20 touchdowns. And one that really surprised me is that Devontae Adams was actually selected in the second round by the Packers. And as everybody does know, he currently plays for the Raiders after he was just traded there. A very big blockbuster trade. Devontae Adams averages about 12.1 yards per reception, 116 games, and he has 73 touchdowns. And then next we have Jordan Matthews, who was drafted by the Eagles, which he was a pretty good wide receiver in my opinion when he first started playing with the Eagles, but now he does play for the 49ers, surprisingly. I didn't even know that he played on the team, but he currently has 12 yards per reception, 76 games, and 22 touchdowns on his career. And then next we have Allen Robinson, which could be Odell's teammate if he does go back to the Rams. And Allen Robinson actually was drafted by the Jaguars, which I don't think a lot of people know. Maybe they do know. I'm not really sure. But Allen Robinson was a really great wide receiver with the Jags. I think I think his stat line with the Jags really kind of fell under the radar. But then after his time with the Jaguars, he went to the Bears, and then now he's with the Rams. And he's put up really solid numbers. He's averaged 12.9 yards per reception. He's played in 100 games and has had 40 touchdowns on his career. And then Odell's LSU teammate Jarvis Landry, who was drafted by the Dolphins at the time, which he was really good with the Dolphins. And then some things kind of happened, and then he ended up going to the Browns. And then now, after the Browns refused to trade him, or they really couldn't find any team that really wanted him, they ended up releasing him, and now he plays with the Saints. And on his career, he has 11 yards per reception, 123 games played, and 37 touchdowns. Next, we have Dre Archer, who I feel like a lot of people know him from Madden Ultimate Team, which I do. Madden Ultimate Mobile, okay, that was something else. Mobile, it was a great game. And Dre Archer, I mean, he currently doesn't play for a team. He was mainly a punt returner and a kick returner for the Steelers. So he didn't really play that much. He only played in 20 games. He didn't have any touchdowns. But as many people do know in Madden, he's an all-star kick and punt returner. I mean, he's an amazing player to have on Madden Ultimate Team if you ever do get him, because he's just so fast. And lastly, we have Bruce Ellington, which is probably the lowest picked wide receiver that's still notable to this day. He hasn't played on a team since 2018, kind of like Kelvin Benjamin. But I believe he was drafted by the 49ers. And he has 9.7 yards per reception. He's played in 44 games and has had 5 total touchdowns. Okay, and moving on to OBJ's first season in 2014 with the Giants. Odell was named AP Offensive Rookie of the Year, alongside actually Aaron Donald, who won Defensive Player of the Year, which is pretty funny that now they were both teammates with the Rams. And there's a lot of people I didn't know were in the 2014 draft. I mean, that, looking in hindsight, that 2014 draft class is kind of stacked to this day. And then there's some names obviously that weren't the best, and then OBJ also went to the Pro Bowl in his rookie season, obviously, and he played 12 games for the Giants with a 70% catch radius, or sorry, not 70% catch radius, 70% catch percentage, and he had 1,305 yards, which was actually, I believe, first on the team. And then he averaged 14.3 yards and 12 touchdowns. And the Giants ended up 6-10, obviously missing the playoffs. But really overall, really great year for a rookie, especially in OBJ's standards. I mean, first on team with receiving yards, and he won Rookie of the Year and went to the Pro Bowl on his first year in the league. So, I mean, that's really good accomplishments right there, and some accolades. And then in 2015, Odell ended up on the second All-Pro and second All-Pro team, and went to the Pro Bowl. He played 15 games with a catch percentage of 60.8 and had 1,450 yards, which is actually first on the team, and averaged 15.1 yards per reception, and had 13 touchdowns. And the Giants ended up 6-10 again. And as for this season, this is his first fine of his career. He was fined $8,681. And I can't remember what it was for. I didn't write this down. But I'll try and find it later. But yeah, he was fined, and then he was also suspended for 1 game, I believe, for misconduct against an official. So he was suspended for 1 game after that. And then in 2016, Odell went again All-Pro second team and to the Pro Bowl. And then he played 16 games for the Giants, had a 59.8% catch percentage. He had 1,367 yards, which was first on the team, and then he averaged 13.5 yards per reception and 10 touchdowns. The Giants ended up 11-5 and made the playoffs, where they lost in the first round to the Packers, losing 38-13. And I should add that season he was fined. First, he was fined $24,309. And I'll try and find that article there and try to put it up if you are watching on the visual version. And then again, during the season, he was fined $12,154, which was later on. And I'll also show that one on the visual version of the podcast. And moving on to the 2017 season, before then, the Giants did exercise the 5th-year option on Odell's contract. So, he was able to play for another season after this season. So Odell ended up fracturing his ankle during the season. So I believe he had a preseason injury, which I do remember in 2017. I remember that he had a preseason injury, so a lot of people were kind of worried about him. And it just didn't look good. But then he was sidelined up to week 2, where I think they played the Detroit Lions. I do remember that part when I was doing my research. And they ended up losing that game. But the very next game, he did come back and had a spectacular game. And then I think they beat the Eagles that week, week 3. And he was playing really well up until week 5, where he ended up fracturing his ankle, I believe. So he did only get to play 4 full games during this season. He had a 61% catch percentage, 302 yards, at which he averaged 12.1 yards and had 3 touchdowns. The Giants without OBJ ended up 3-13. And definitely was not a great season by the Giants. And then after the season 2018, I believe they did draft Saquon Barkley in the draft, which was great, but again, not great on the Giants' part, and they definitely need OBJ. That season just didn't look too good. And moving on to the 2018 season, Odell actually played 12 games. He had a 62.1% completion percentage, 1,052 yards, which is actually first on the team again. So basically 4 out of the 5 years that he played with the Giants, he was first in receiving yards, which besides his 4th season where he actually fractured his ankle, so he wasn't able to play the entire season, he was actually 4th on the team still with receiving yards. So he was doing good. He averaged 13.7 yards per reception and had 6 touchdowns. The Giants ended up 5-11, and here's where the attitude problems were already kind of starting up after the second year in his league. And the play that kind of started all for OBJ was the one-handed catch in his rookie year. So obviously, the fame was getting to him pretty early on in his career. And in his second season, he was fine. In 3rd season, he was fine again. 4th season, he was kind of out. And the 5th season, he wasn't doing too bad. He wasn't really being fined or disciplined at all. But he just had a lot of attitude problems, I guess, in the locker room, and according to insiders for the team at that time. And his time with the Giants was kind of up in the air for a little while, until at the beginning, in the off season of the 2018 season, they ended up trading away Odell to the Browns. Now, that trade package was OBJ and Olivier Vernon, sending to the Browns for Jabril Peppers, Kevin Zeitler, and the Browns' 1st and 3rd picks. And Odell ended up playing 16 games for the Browns. He had a 55.6% completion percentage, and had 1,085 yards, which was 2nd on the team, right behind Jarvis Landry, which history kind of repeats itself, which is pretty funny. But everybody was kind of hyped about that pairing, Jarvis Landry and Odell coming back together with the Browns. So a lot of people thought the Browns were really going to make it far in the league. He averaged 14 yards per reception. And he had 4 touchdowns, and the Browns ended up 6-10. So, not the season that many people expected. There were just a couple problems with Baker Mayfield kind of growing and maturing as a quarterback, and just problems, I feel like, with chemistry mainly between the quarterbacks, wide receivers, and the defense just wasn't that good either. So they definitely need some help, and they did. So in the 2020 season, Odell played 7 games before he tore his ACL, which everybody knows. I believe he went for a tackle on a pick against the Bengals, and he ended up tearing his ACL. And Odell, before he suffered his ACL tear, he had 23 receptions for 319 yards and 3 touchdowns. And the Browns ended 11-5, and without OBJ for the entire postseason, ended up losing in the AFC divisional round after beating the Steelers in the first round. They ended up losing in the divisional round to the Chiefs, and they kind of went back to the drawing board. I'm sorry. And then in 2021, a lot of people had really high hopes for the Browns, mainly because they just made it to the playoffs the season before, and they basically had the same roster. Everything was looking good, and so Odell played 6 games with the Browns until kind of the drama started coming out again, and I believe OBJ's dad tweeted out something about Baker Mayfield not throwing to OBJ, and didn't end up good. I could say that. After that, OBJ, I believe, requested a trade, and they didn't even request a trade. I don't think, I think they just, should have waived him after a while, disputing whether or not to keep him, trade him. I believe they waived him, and so they, after you waive somebody, you just gotta wait to see all the teams make offers for the contracts. And then OBJ ended up signing with the Rams. Now, at this point, the Rams last season, everybody kind of knows they were making some moves. They got Matthew Stafford. Cooper Kupp was, basically one of the best players in the league at this point. And Von Miller, they just got Von Miller from the Broncos. Like, they were putting all their chips on. So definitely getting OBJ, everybody knew that they were going to be contenders shooting for that Super Bowl trophy. And I believe he had to quarantine for 2 weeks due to the, or not 2 weeks, hold on, let me see. He only played 14 games. Yeah, about 2 weeks, I want to say, or a week. So they were without OBJ for about 1 to 2 weeks. And then he was in for the first game against the 49ers, which didn't look great. But I think he started really, becoming his own player with the Rams. So he ended up playing 8 games. He had 305 yards and 5 touchdowns. And the Rams ended up making it to the Super Bowl, obviously, where Odell had 2 receptions for 52 yards and a touchdown before tearing his ACL, which probably, I think if he was healthy for that Super Bowl game, I think he would have one of the best games in his career. A lot of people say that, he would have given Cooper Kupp a run for his money for that Super Bowl MVP, and it looked like the way that it was going, OBJ was really gonna make it. He was really gonna do well in the Super Bowl, but he ended up tearing his ACL. But the Rams still won the Super Bowl without him there. And now he has a ring, which I feel like a lot of people are actually kind of happy to see OBJ with a ring, because, I feel like he's a player that deserved it after all. But, I think overall it was a really, really, nice experience, especially as a Lions fan, to see Matthew Stafford with a ring, really. And then so now, as of right now, he is a free agent. The Rams have not signed him. I believe they are trying to look at some contract negotiations to see what they can get him under. It looks like OBJ just really wants a big deal, and a lot of teams are really hesitant on giving him that big deal. But we'll have to see. But at the end, so far, of Odell's career, he has played 96 games. He has 7,367 yards. He has averaged 13.9 yards per reception, 56 touchdowns, and has a 60.3% catch percentage. So overall, I think those are really great stats to have on your career. Now, to answer the question that started off this video, is Odell overrated? And I feel like at some point, in my opinion, I think overall, if you're just going to go on the baseline, I think that he's properly rated. I wouldn't really say that he's overrated. I wouldn't say that he's underrated. At some points, he really is overrated. I feel like a lot of people are like, OBJ. But is he really that good of a wide receiver? I'm not sure. He hasn't really shown me that he can be one of the best. He could be one of the best on a Giants team, which hasn't done the best. And he didn't really have any special stats with the Browns, where he did have competition at the wide receiver spot. Obviously, we don't really know what he's going to do with the Rams, because he hasn't played a full season, so I'm not sure. I think he is a really great wide receiver. Do I think he's top 10? No. You can make an argument that he's possibly in the top 20. For me at least, he's got to be in the top 30 wide receivers in the league. I don't think he's really that low. But top 30, I feel like you had to put him there. Top 20, you can make an argument, but he's definitely not top 10 in my books. I think there's definitely better wide receivers in the league than Odell. And so I think he's properly rated throughout the league from what I've heard people talk about OBJ with. I think he's a little overhated, definitely. A lot of people hate on him, and I mean, sure, maybe his locker room issues, haven't sat the best with people, but I mean, literally every athlete has a problem in the locker room. People are hating on Aaron Rodgers for everything that he's done in the locker room and things like that. So I think a person shouldn't be hated and have their talent decided upon the person that they are, or what they've done. So, in my opinion, I do think that OBJ is a really good wide receiver. At points, I do think he's overrated. I don't think he's underrated at all. So, for my guess, I say that he's properly rated, but he's definitely overrated a lot in the NFL media. And apart from that, that'll be the end of today's episode. I want to thank you all for listening and watching all the way through. If you are watching on YouTube, make sure you give it a like, subscribe, and leave a comment on, what you think. Is OBJ overrated? Is he underrated? Is he properly rated? Let me know what you guys think about OBJ in the comments below. And if you're listening to it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please give me a follow. I highly appreciate that. Or give the podcast a 5-star review. I want to thank everybody again for listening and watching all the way through, and have a great rest of your day.